Hey everyone, this is Dr. Casey Johnson. Thank you so much for taking time to listen to the Unlock Wellness podcast. I know you're going to love today's episode with Dylan Steeples. Dylan is doing some amazing work with his podcast, so I'm excited to have him on to share a story with you guys. If you've been loving the Unlock Wellness podcast, be sure to jump onto iTunes, subscribe, and write a review. It really helps me out a lot, and I really appreciate all of the feedback and support. Also, be sure to follow me on social media to keep up with the latest podcast episodes. The best way to connect with me is on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. My username across the board is at Dr. Casey Johnson. That's DrKaseyJohnson. You can also check out my website at drkaseyjohnson.com. It has all of the past podcast episodes and more information about each guest under the Listen tab. While you're on my site, also be sure to check out the Shop tab where you can check out my first book of my Healthy Children's Book series and learn about the Unlock Wellness Project, which supplies a wellness bag to a child in need for each book purchased. Thank you again for listening. I hope this episode leaves you feeling inspired to start making positive changes to your health. Now it's time for today's episode. I hope you love my conversation with Dylan Steeples. Welcome to the Unlock Wellness podcast. I'm Dr. Casey and excited for today's guest. I'm here with Dylan Steeples. And just a big shout out to Jackson Foster for telling me how awesome Dylan was and just to reach out to him. And so Jackson's great. And be sure to check out our podcast together as well. And that's back on episode 103. So be sure to go back and check out that because he's amazing. But the Dylan is host of the Plant Power podcast. He's also a plant-based ultra runner and is just doing an amazing job at helping people along their wellness journey. So I'm excited to have Dylan on to share his story and just the awesome work that he's doing. So just Dylan, thank you so much for taking time to come on all the way in New Zealand. So I'm glad we were able to connect. It's pretty crazy because it's like 9:30 here and it's 3:30 there tomorrow. So it's funny. But but thank you so much, Dylan, for taking time to come on.
No, of course. And just like kia ora to all of your audience. It's amazing to be on your podcast and thanks for inviting me on. It's amazing.
Yeah. How did you meet Jackson?
It's pretty, so I would listen to the Ritual podcast. It's the first podcast I got into. It must have been two or 3 years ago. And I'd actually thought about starting my own podcast. And at that time I was working for Oxfam, a sort of a non-profit. And I'd listened to all the Ritual podcasts because I was just loving him at that moment. I got his app and I went back through the podcast and I found the one with Jackson Foster and I listened to that. And he was actually, when I listened to that, because he's the same age as me. And when I heard that, I was like, wow, this guy is my age and he is doing something. Because when I was listening to the Ritual podcast, I thought there's no way I could start a podcast. Ritual was the most badass, coolest guy ever. Like, who am I? And then I heard Jackson, who obviously is another incredible human being, but just being at the same age and sort of time in life and seeing what he had done inspired me to start my podcast. So I was listening to his podcast, really, really loving it. And then Jackson, so he's pretty crazy, but he put out on his podcast that he wanted to ride his bike from Chiang Mai after the bike festival, the vegan bike festival, and ride down to Singapore. And this is like very much who I am as a person. I heard that and I was like, okay, I'm being called to do this. So I sent him an email. I was like, hey man, I listened to your podcast. I love it. Can I come on your trip? And I checked flights and they were cheap. So we met in Chiang Mai. It was probably 2 years ago now. And then we spent like 40 days together with two others riding down Southeast Asia.
That's awesome.
Trying to find eating all this amazing plant-based food, some not so good plant-based food. Sleeping in the same bed together, spooning together, swimming together. Like we got very close because we were trying to save money. So we're very, very, very close. We don't spend a lot of time together, but we have a really strong connection.
That's awesome. Cool. No, I love that. That's cool that you were like, brave enough, at that point to like reach out to a total stranger and that's really awesome. I love that. And kind of like Dylan, to take it back a little bit, just kind of tell everybody your backstory, where you're from, and just what your health and wellness level was kind of like at a younger age and how it's really progressed over time.
Yeah, it's pretty, I feel like it's a pretty cliche story, but I still find it interesting for where I'm at now. So I'm from New Zealand, or Aotearoa, which is the Te Reo name for our country, and I live in Auckland, which is our biggest city. I've been here my whole entire life, so I'm 26. I've been here for ages. And kind of when I look back on my health and well-being journey, I just didn't really care about it when I was younger. I just kind of ate whatever parents made, just like typical normal like amazing food. And it was kind of funny because I was actually quite overweight in primary school, like very, very chubby and very self-conscious, and bullied quite a lot because of it. Which really developed it kind of humbled me, and I've kind of carried that through to my later years, which I'm actually quite grateful for, because I'm not like a real stuck-up person. I was very humbled at a young age. And I remember I would wear a t-shirt when we had swimming at school, because I was just so self-conscious of my rolls of fat. So I didn't really think about it. And then basically what happened is that I went into what we call intermediate, which is kind of like mid school, and I just lost all my weight and became the skinniest person in the world, and the tallest.
A lot taller.
Yeah. And then it actually wasn't, it's kind of happened real funny. I used to go to the gym, and I was all about like getting big and having the protein shakes and stuff. And then my friend, I don't know if you know Tony Horden, he does like P90X and stuff. Yeah. So I'm a very big fan of Tony Horden.
He was your friend?
No. My friend introduced me to his workouts.
Oh, okay. I gotcha.
And so I started doing these workouts, and coming from a place where I didn't really have any athletic background or wasn't really good at anything to do with movement or stuff, I was doing these workouts at home on a pull-up bar that I'd made out of a dog bed, like nailed into the wall. And just like,
that's awesome.
I was like, holy shit, I can do 15 pull-ups, I can do 30 push-ups. And I realized I kind of built this resilience for doing really pushing myself, and just completely by myself. Obviously I was watching, the good man, the Tony Horden.
Yeah.
And I started to, he was very much about health, and he used to be vegan. I think he is vegan now again.
Is he? That's cool.
Yeah, I think cool. So. And then someone told me about, so I joined a tramping club in New Zealand, which is, I think you guys call it hiking.
Yeah, I've never heard of a hiking club. That's not like cross country, just like straight like hiking.
Yeah, just going out for some epic weekends and doing some like really cool tramps. We call them tramps.
That's cool. No, I've never heard of that, but I'm sure they're out there probably in certain areas. Yeah. That's cool. Yeah.
And then a friend from that just said, "Do you want to do a half marathon on the trail?" And kind of I just like jumped into it, thought it'd be cool, did that. It was the worst thing ever. But then the next year I did the marathon version of that. It was still the worst thing. I think it took me 6 hours and 40 minutes. And then from there, I read Scott Jurick's book, Eat and Run. And he kind of brought all my little threads of my life. He kind of like tied them on one big, nice loop, being like a spiritual kind of ultra running plant-based guy. And he just like inspired me so much. So I did my first 60K ultra maybe like 3 years ago, and I think I got 8th, which was pretty cool. And then I went on to do an 85 kilometer ultra. I got 3rd, and then I did a 100 kilometer ultra. So I just started getting into running and just feeling so good and so connected to my body, and just pushing I just really love to do crazy stuff that is really hard, because I just learn so much. And then now up until today, I basically went vegetarian, and then over like a 3 year period, I slowly moved to like a whole food plant-based diet. and now I'm here today. I have another ultra. This was Saturday actually. So
That's awesome. That's cool.
yeah.
What's the distance this weekend?
There's 100K as well.
Oh man.
It's with a group of it's a group of 4 of us though. So we do it. We have to finish together, which is pretty crazy.
That's cool. Well, at least you had the company though. That's awesome. And like you were talking about that you read Scott's book. Was it after you read that book that really got you into like looking into more like plant-based eating, or what kind of triggered that, or like when did it start along that path?
So I think I lived out of home for a while in this place called Wellington, and I just started to feel that eating meat wasn't the healthiest thing. And I remember just randomly searching one day, is red meat healthy for you? And it was quite a long time ago. I remember I was on a bus and I just found this one article saying, it's like probably not the best. So I just randomly cut that out, and then I wasn't really watching anything. It's just how I felt. I cut pork out, and then I was eating a lot of chicken and fish and stuff. And then I think I stumbled across Forks Over Knives, and I watched that. And we were at this random jazz or blues festival, and we went to an Indian restaurant. I was like, you know what? I'm going to get the vegetarian option. And then I did that. And then it wasn't until I was on a bus in Peru, traveling to somewhere, I don't know, you go on these buses for like 22 hours, and I had Cowspiracy, and I had it on my laptop for like 6 months, and I just never watched it. And I also studied geography and environmental science, so I knew the impacts of eating like an animal-based diet on the planet. And I watched this movie, and it just came at the right time for me. Like, I believe that everyone has their own little journey, and things will trigger you at certain points to do things. And that for me was just blew my mind. And I went vegan in Peru,
That's awesome.
Just like that.
Cowspiracy, Cowspiracy is one of my favorites. It's just like it really does like blow your mind when you just see all of that. You're like, how is this not everywhere? Like it's so cool.
Definitely.
That's awesome. How is like the plant-based community in New Zealand? Is that like a popular thing now, or like what's it like if you are eating that way in New Zealand?
I mean, I would say compared to America, we have it's more of like a vegan community, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. It's still very much about animal rights and more that side. I kind of feel it's not. I really wouldn't call it a plant-based community. When I think of plant-based community, I feel like there's a lot of like athletes and people who are really pumped about eating healthy, like eating a healthy plant-based diet.
Yeah.
So it's cool. It's fine. There's heaps of plant-based restaurants, especially in Auckland. But it's definitely not massive. Because we have a massive, our culture here is like dairy and meat. We have a massive dairy industry. It's one of our biggest brings the most amount of money into our economy. So
that's crazy.
We love our milk.
Yeah, no, that's crazy. But like, whenever you were making that transition to eating more plant-based, I know you kind of said that you picked that meal after you saw that and it started gradually going like that. But like, was there any struggles, or after you saw that it was kind of like no turning back? Wasn't really that hard?
Yeah, I feel like when I try to get rid of milk and stuff, and I used to love having like cheese and omelets and all that kind of thing. That it was just simple things like that. It was hard to not eat that food anymore just because I loved it so much. But it was just such a slow, gradual transition. It just happened piece by piece. But once I decided that I was going to do it, there's no going back.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. And like, I love that the Rich Roll podcast was one of your go-to resources. He's so great, right?
Yeah. He's amazing.
Yeah. Was there any episodes like that you remember that really stood out to you during like your whole journey with that?
Oh,
I'm trying to think too, because there's just so many good. There's so many that I haven't even listened to yet.
Yeah.
You go through like binges and then take a little break.
Yeah. I really love Guru Singh. I don't know if you've listened to his ones.
I listened to the newest one. He's been on there a few times, right?
Yeah, the first one is crazy, and I actually met him when I was in America maybe 2 months ago, and I met him, which was like so cool.
That's cool. Was he awesome?
Yeah, he was. I don't know if you've been around like a very spiritually enlightened person, but just the level of presence that he brings to you when you just come to this guy and he just looks you in the eyes, and I gave him a hug, and I just felt like he was really there with me. It was a really surreal experience, actually.
Right. Yeah, that's cool. That's awesome.
Really cool. But yeah, besides that, I feel no, probably those, I would say Guru Singh was one of the most ones that had, really made me think, because he's very plant-based as well, but comes from a more sort of, I guess you would call it like energetic sort of spiritual place.
Yeah, no, the last one, I'll have to go back and listen to the older ones, but the newest one that I listened to, really, it was super interesting for sure. He seemed like a really amazing person, but no, that's awesome. And like, how have you done with your plant-based like way of eating with your ultra running? What was it hard to adapt to that because you are using like so much energy, or were you able to figure out what worked for you pretty quickly? It's cool, and I know you've probably came across the same thing, but like there's so many ways that you can be plant-based. Like some people eat more fruit, right? Some people eat more like raw food. Like what worked best for you with the kind of energy that you were putting out?
Yeah, it's they're kind of one and the same. My running journey has been the same as my health journey into kind of like plant-based eating. Very similar to Scott Jurek in a weird kind of way. But I would say, I think like number one for me has been eating a lot of food. But I've kind of moved more towards a really sort of high carb and quite a low fat diet, just because it's so much. I just crave carbs when I get back from a run or just for dinner and stuff if I've been running all day. So I just kind of listen to my body that way. But I mean, I like to eat really healthy because I know it's amazing for my body, and I'm always making sure, like I love just eating turmeric root just by itself. That's cool. I'm just imagining it going to my muscles and just being like, oh, like, thank you. But then again, I will still like, I'll eat like a vegan donut or like a cake every now and then, just because I'm really in a place where if it's going to cause me more stress not doing it, then I'll do it. But I'm also very aware about eating extremely like high nutrient dense and a lot of calories to make sure I can run and perform at my best. But I'm not like a super strict eater, because that's just not.
I think you have to be. I think like if you're trying to make it sustainable and you're like, I'm never going to eat anything bad ever again, like I think that's a bad way to go. I mean, even if like you're not vegan, like everybody has like that pizza night, right? Or like those the night that they go out to eat something bad, but like you could still do that like as a vegan. Maybe you have like your junk food night is like you order a pizza, but you get it like cheeseless with the vegan, you know what I mean? I mean, we do that every once in a while. Like we'll order, there's places where you can order pizza, the crust is vegan, just get it cheeseless and like nice, it's just extra, obviously it's extra bread and stuff, but we're not eating that every day. But I think it's cool because it makes it more like normal, doable if you're not restricting yourself like that.
I kind of feel as well. I know eating is really important, but it's not like the be all end all. Our bodies are pretty amazing at kind of living off anything. So I think if you're gonna have some unhealthy food every now and then, it's completely fine. Your body's not gonna like just fall over and die, or you're not gonna get extremely sick from. It's just it's like what you do most of the time, not what you're doing 10 or 5% of the time. And I think people can get quite obsessed with being so like nuclear about what they're eating, and it's just like it's cool just to chill and just relax and enjoy life sometimes as well.
Right, because I mean, because if you're stressed and in a bad state of mind because you're so stressed about what you're doing, that's going to have a worse effect than like not eating a bad meal every once in a while. No, for sure. And like whenever you started your ultra running, you're starting to implement those things, your energy's there, but like what was the hardest part of that for you? Was it more physical or was it more mindset? Because I've gotten to speak with a few ultra runners that it's cool because I know you have to go to like a new place like mentally for something like that, like it's painful and it's not fun, but it really is just like all mindset. But was it harder physically or mentally for you?
I think probably a bit of both. I went pretty hot out of the gate when I started running. Just I think everybody does that, and I definitely got like I was in denial about having injuries and stuff, like really bad IT stuff, and just but still running just because I loved it so much. And it's only now, like in the last year, probably where I can say I'm like mostly injury free. Because it does take a lot. You can't to get to the point where you can run ultras. I think it takes 4 or 5 years for your tendons and your muscles and your ligaments and everything to be able to cope with that stress. Mm-hmm. But I mean the mental stuff. Yeah, I know because I've done it so many times. I know that this weekend is going to be like really, really crap. Like at some points, like it's going to be really terrible. And it's not even like sometimes you go to a different place where that struggle was just so immense, but it's pretty simple. You can either stop or you can keep going, and it's just choosing to keep going. So that's what I love about it though. That mental game is definitely hard, but it kind of comes in down to what I really believe in, which is being present and just in life. And as soon as if you're running and you're at 50 Ks and I don't know what that'd be in miles, but if you're at 50 Ks and you still have another 50 to go, and you start thinking about that, your body will just be like, okay, sweet, time to shut down. So you have to be present, and that's what I love. It's the hardest part, but it's taught me so much about that.
Right.
But, yeah, I don't know if that answered your question.
No, yeah, it does for sure. It's just like it's all that state, right? Because like you said yours was you first did that 60K, and I'm sure at like maybe 50 you were like, oh my gosh,
dying. Yeah,
right. Yeah. Now, like if you're doing 100, you get to. I mean, it's just I'm sure like you get to 60, and you're like, and you're all of a sudden at 20, like it's just crazy. Like you can push yourself even further. And that halfway point seems like crazy for the 60, but then that halfway point's even further for the 100K, and it's just like knowing that it just completely changes everything. If that makes sense. It's
right. Yeah. Well, I would love to see what my limit is, because I don't know when I would actually stop. Like what would actually stop me, and would I need to like collapse and be unconscious or what? You know.
Yeah. Do you think like your drive is like, because it's almost like if people can like live with knowing that the what ifs, is it, do you think it's that aspect of it, or do you think it would be just straight physical that you would have to get to?
If I would want to see how far I could go, or what pushes me to run?
What pushes you to run?
I think it's just like I made a contract with myself to do something, and then if I don't do it, then who's losing out? Like only me. I've said that I was going to do something and then I didn't do it. Like that's what drives me.
Yeah.
Like I set out to achieve a goal, and I could easily stop and it wouldn't even matter, but then I've stopped and I didn't. It's not even a goal thing. It's just, it's really simple. Like I decided to do something and I'm here doing it, and I can either stop or I can keep going. Like it's really simple.
Right.
And I decided to keep going.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I've heard like people talk about just ultra running, there's any type of long distance endurance event. It's just like it's a moving form of meditation, because you really do have to dig deep, and it's like breaking you physically, and it makes you really kind of dig deep to where like issues that are going on or like things that you need to work through, but you're able to get to that because it's just you out there. I mean, even with 4 other people, it's still you still have to deal with your own mindset,
Yeah. I to be honest, I would love someone to be able to explain why you can run for, like, you can get to a point where you're just broken and then run for 30 Ks broken, and then all of a sudden you just have this magical bit of energy that comes from nowhere. Like I would love to see where that comes. Like if someone could figure out what that is, that would be amazing.
For sure. Do you listen to David Goggins, or not David? Well, David Goggins too, but he was on Joe Rogan's podcast. Did you listen to that recently?
I haven't listened to that one yet, but I have listened to him on Rich Roll's podcast.
Oh yeah, I mean he's awesome, and like I don't know if I've listened to him on Rich's podcast. I'm sure they're kind of similar, but go listen to him on Joe Rogan's though, because it's just like, I mean, it's crazy, and all of those races that he did, like he was, I mean, overweight and like pushed himself and basically did like however many miles with like fully broken body, but still push his way through it. Like, if you're listening, go check out that episode as well. It's just like,
yeah, it's good. Yeah,
it's really crazy to see like what people can achieve when they're just at a whole nother level of like mindset.
That's crazy.
It is. And like, we're talking about podcasts, and you have your podcast. If you want to like talk about, I know you kind of talked about that. You were inspired by Jackson, and because he was the same age, and he had a podcast. But like, what was the day that just like you were like, okay, I'm going to do it? You were inspired. Kind of describe like what all of that was like when you first wanted to start it.
So it was a real cool story. I was actually just going for a run, listening to a podcast, and I don't know if you get that feeling when you listen to a podcast. You probably do because you have a podcast as well. When you're just listening to a conversation, you're just buzzing on what they're talking about. You're just like, oh my God, this is amazing. Like, how have I not heard about this? And you're just so pumped about life, and you feel like you've just shifted everything in your mind. I was listening to that, and this thing came to me. It was like, you need to start a podcast, and I actually ignored it the first time, and then it happened again. It was like, you need to start a podcast, and then I was kind of thinking it would be cool. Like, I love Rich Roll's podcast and Jackson's, but I don't even know how many podcasts there is in New Zealand. I know of one other podcast. There's probably more, but there's no podcast that sits down with people for genuine, like long form, just conversations, kind of like what Rich Roll does. And I thought it would be cool if we could do that in New Zealand, because I'm sure there's some of the amazing plant-based like doctors and athletes and mindful spiritual people in New Zealand who would love to share their story. And it felt like sort of like a mission that I was given to overcome. And it's weird because I, like, especially in school and even now, I'm like really like shy and anxious around like talking to new people and stuff. Like, I'm a lot better than I used to be because I do the podcast, but it definitely, if you knew me when I was a kid, looking at me doing this now is just so crazy. So it was kind of combined with this being told to do it, and then wanting to share these conversations and also play my part in this movement, because I love our planet. Like, I know everybody says that, but I really do care and love about the planet and the animals that walk on it and stuff. And also just like, as a challenge to myself to do something different and exciting. And that's what happened. So it was a lot of weird, crazy things.
No, I love that, because like I'm like naturally more on the introverted side too. Yeah. And I just remember, and I probably have shared this on the podcast before, but like the first, when I first launched the podcast, I launched it with like maybe like 3 episodes or something. And when I put that on Facebook, I for real, Dylan, wanted to throw up the entire like, I was like, I couldn't eat anything. I'm like, is this okay? Like, so it's like, I totally get it, but then it gets easier. But it's super cool, right? Because you get to connect with people that you otherwise
oh my God
do, right? Yeah. It's just
it's amazing.
You get inspired by each guest, and it's really rewarding.
Yeah, I think, I don't know if Rich Roll's called like the best scam in the world as well.
What's that?
Rich Roll's called it one of the best scams in the world, because you can just contact people and be like, "Yo, do you want to have a conversation with me?"
That's
and they're like,
hilarious.
"Yeah, of course."
I haven't heard him say that, but that's kind of funny. I love that too. Yeah, because everybody wants to share their story, and otherwise it's like, if I would have emailed you, I mean, you're pretty cool, so you probably would have been okay. But some of these people, you can't just like email and be like, "Hey, can we chat for like
exactly?"
an hour?
Yeah.
But it is really cool, and like, what have you learned from your whole podcast process? Like, what have you taken away from guests? What is like, you know what I mean? Like, what's been like some learning points that you've had from just doing your whole podcast?
I think just having a conversation with someone, how to have a proper conversation with someone and listen.
Yeah.
And it's when I listen to podcasts now, I can kind of, and as an interview or a conversation, I can kind of see where the person has missed out on a thread, or someone mentions something and it passes by and you're like, no. They just so that really learning to listen to someone, and also just to trust. Probably the biggest is just trusting that the conversation will happen and it will be amazing. I'm not really big on planning everything. I kind of just like to do my research and then hit record and just hope that I'll connect with the person enough to create a good conversation that people want to listen to.
Right.
So that's probably the biggest thing is that. And another thing as well is it's you kind of, when you're recording yourself every single week for an hour, like hundreds of hours, you've got like 100 episodes. So
yeah,
you're listening back to them and constantly and kind of engaging with that. Your thought, what's coming to your mouth is basically like the thoughts that are in your head. So you're very aware of how you speak and how you engage with someone. So it's kind of like I've been able to refine just how I engage with people in general, because you're so aware and the way you think, because you're doing it and recording it and engaging it with every week. So that, I don't know if that makes sense, but it's like
it does. Yeah, no, it's very true, because it's hard, because sometimes when you're talking with somebody, you're like, sometimes you maybe overthink something, and like you said, you can miss the thread of a conversation that could have happened. And it's hard sometimes, right? Because you want the conversation to keep rolling in a good direction. It's that's interesting though. No, I love that.
Yeah.
That's cool. So talk about kind of the style of your podcast. So just the kind of guests that you've had on, the kind of conversations that you like to have whenever you have people on.
Cool. Yeah. I mean, I'm interested in a lot of things. I really love talking to doctors and stuff. I love talking to athletes. But I do kind of like to get a bit more deep with people. I'm really into mindfulness and that meditation aspect. I really want to get people thinking and offer conversations that you kind of feel, number one, you feel like you're there. So they're not interviews. Mm-hmm. Kind of quite similar to this, where it's just offering a space, like a real casual conversation, but also getting to the sort of to the crux of who the person is. And depending on who you are or where you are in your life, you might listen to a certain conversation, it just really clicks with you. And that's what's happened with me with podcasts. And another thing as well is I like to be very vulnerable and authentic and genuine. So I'm not here to kind of be like, wow, look at me, I'm this plant-based ultra runner. I'm also I deal with a lot of anxiety. So I've had people talking about their mental health and how a plant-based diet has helped that. I don't like bullshit. I really want to offer genuine stuff, which is, I would say, is the underlying thing. And sort of I do like to talk about mindfulness, and sometimes start a podcast, like the introduction with maybe a quick meditation or something, just because a lot of people haven't taken the time to just slow down and just stop. So if I can just be that little, bang, slow down, be present, then that's really cool to me.
That is awesome. Was that was the meditation yoga aspect of it, the mindfulness, was that there before you started eating more plant-based, or did that kind of go along with it?
Yeah, that's sort of been a thread that went along with it as well. I kind of was, when I was at university, there was a really cool Hare Krishna group there, which was very not Hare Krishna. It was very much just very surface level, here's some yoga, here's some vegan food. So I was like, oh, this is pretty cool. And then I did a 10-day Vipassana when I got back from my bike ride with Jackson, actually. And that just kind of blew everything out of the water. I was like, oh my God. And it's just where because I'm just a very sort of quite a quiet, sort of thoughtful person. So it seemed quite a natural thing for me, I think. Yeah,
no, I love that. That's cool. And how often are you putting out podcasts? That way people can kind of keep an eye out for those and just keep up with, the guests that you have?
Yeah, so I put out podcasts basically every single week. I'm trying to not be as not worrying about being super consistent with that, because I realize that if I miss 1 week, it's not the end of the world. I would rather put out a good podcast rather than stress and put out just any podcast.
Right.
And I'm starting to realize that with the podcast, it's not necessarily about being every week, and because there's some other things I want to do as well, but I still going hard every single week with a podcast.
Well, it's the same. It's the same as eating. Like we were talking about, like the eating thing, right? It's like if you're stressing out so much all the time, you can't really put out what you want to into the world. And it's the exact same thing.
Yeah. I would say the podcast is the hardest thing I've ever done, but the most rewarding thing I've ever done.
Exactly. No, I couldn't agree more. And like, is there anything like you're working on in the future that you just want to share with people, or just continuing to put out really awesome conversations?
Yeah, I think I'm beginning to realize that the podcast started from a place of me wanting to create something, basically be Rich Roll. And I'm not Rich Roll. I'm Dylan Steeples. I'm from New Zealand.
Which is amazing.
Yeah, and that's what it is. I'm amazing, but I maybe more like what I want to offer more is more of my mindfulness stuff, and really just being real with people and inspiring them to like adopt changes in their lifestyle, but like real, like, because it's so hard to be plant-based, like for people who are trying to do it, but you're with your friends and family and stuff, and it's not it's not easy to be different in the world. Like there's no point joking about that, because it's just not right. So I really want to move more towards that, being like empowering people, so they're like, yes, like I can do this. So that's going to be like more of me speaking, and like not just having like podcast guests on just because I have to have a podcast that week. So it's going to be definitely more mindful and driven sort of towards that, if that makes any sense.
It does for sure. Because like, I mean, you can listen to a lot of things and get inspired, and it sounds really great. Yeah. Go out into the real world, and it's like people are hard on that. Like I'm a chiropractor. Like people are tough on chiropractors, even though like I'm in love with it. It's amazing. I mean, but like, so I'm used to always having to deal with what other people are saying. So, so it's like, so I mean, if you can build your mindset towards like you're doing the right thing, like this is helping my body heal and function at a higher level, and you're just reinforcing that with them, like that makes them stronger when they're out with their friends, be like, oh no, it's cool, I'm gonna get this. Like that's a huge deal.
Yeah, that's massive.
Yeah, that's awesome. No, I love that. And like, what is the best way for people to follow you on social media? That way they can keep up whenever you do put out a podcast, or just whenever you're posting anything.
Yeah, I mean, I have a Instagram, which is just Plant Power NZ or NZ. And then I've got a Facebook page, which is just Plant Power. Everything's pretty much Plant Power. Awesome. And if anyone wants to email me, it's just dylan@plantpower.co.nz as well. I reply to everyone. So if you want to engage with me, I'm right here.
Yeah, shoot him a message and say hey. Yeah. Awesome. And then Dylan, just closing question that I ask every guest.
Oh, exciting.
If you just had one piece of advice for the audience, maybe it's something that's been your biggest takeaway through your whole wellness journey so far, but if you just had one piece of advice to give, what would it be?
You are amazing. You're a beautiful human being. That's all I have to say.
No, that's perfect. That's all you need to say, right?
Just to everyone listening, you're amazing. You're so amazing. And don't worry about what anyone else thinks. Seriously.
Yeah, no, that's amazing, Dylan.
You're amazing as well, Casey.
You're amazing as well. Everybody's amazing.
Everybody's amazing.
Thank you so much for taking time to come on. I really loved having you, and I'm excited to share and promote everything that you're doing. So just keep up the amazing work.
Thank you. Yeah, and if anyone wants to come over and especially you as well, Casey, if you're ever in New Zealand, just hit me up.
We will definitely hit you up on that for sure. All right, Dylan. Thank you so much.
Yeah, peace, everybody. Thanks, Casey.
Thank you guys so much for listening to today's episode. I hope you loved my conversation with Dylan. I love the work that he's doing, so be sure to give him a follow on social media to keep up with everything that he's been working on. You can find his social media links and his podcast link that we talked about in the episode in the show notes, but you can also find them on my website as well at drcaseyjohnson.com. That's DrKaseyJohnson.com. Click on the Listen tab. Then from there, you'll be able to see all of the past guests that have come on the Unlock Wellness podcast, read a little bit about each guest, and be able to click on their social media links, website, all of that. So all of Dylan's information can be found on my site as well. If you guys loved today's episode with Dylan, Be sure to jump onto iTunes, subscribe, and write a review. It really helps me out a lot, and I really appreciate all of the feedback and support. Thank you guys so much again for tuning into today's episode. I hope you loved it. I hope it inspires you. And most importantly, I hope you take action.